Of course. While we've got you, we thought we'd ask you about Brexit. I'm sure you won't mind. 2-year transition
Not
is...
at all.
2-year transition, thank you, is what the Prime Minister was suggesting during her speech in Florence. Are we ever going to leave?
Yes, we're going to leave the European Union in March 2019. We're then going to have a transition or implementation period of around 2 years when business, when all of us can get ready for the new opportunities that being fully outside the European Union can bring.
Why can't you all agree that as a party, though?
We have.
Are you sure?
Yes.
OK, so why is Boris and the Prime Minister at loggerheads?
They're not.
Oh, come off it. Of course they are. And he's been very naughty, stealing the headlines ahead of Tory party conference. In fact, the article that he did in the article he did in the Telegraph, he was specifically told not to deliver that as a speech, so he gave it to the Telegraph instead. Number 10 said, "Don't you dare," and so he wrote it for the Telegraph.
It's a brilliant article, wasn't it? It put forward the case for Britain leaving the European Union with the vim, brio and optimism that is Boris's hallmark. And it encapsulated Conservative Party policy perfectly, and it acted as the perfect overture to the Prime Minister's speech in Florence. I sat around the cabinet table with Boris, with Philip, with the Prime Minister, as she outlined the approach that she was going to take in Florence with her speech, and we were all united behind it. As Boris said, we were a nest of singing birds.
Nobody believes that, by the way. And if that was the case, why did Number 10 not want him to deliver it as a speech?
Well, I wasn't party to any conversations about speeches.
Oh, you're only
I'm
there
not
when they're
Number
singing.
10. What I do know.
Not when they're whining.
Sorry?
You're only there when they're singing, not when they're whining.
Well, the cabinet together was singing from the same hymn sheet. One of the things about the approach that was outlined in Florence is that it has the total backing of the cabinet and the Conservative Party. Now, Kay, you are a brilliant news hound, and therefore you have
Sorry,
an ability always. Well, you always want to try and find an element of soap opera or drama in any of these things. That's entirely understandable.
No, what I do is hold politicians
ultimately,
to account, and that's what I'm trying to do with you now.
Yes, but one of the things that you're, one of the lines that you're maintaining or hurling at me is the idea that there's a difference of opinion between Boris and Theresa on our transition period of around 2 years or our ultimate exit from the European Union. The truth is that on policy we are united, but there is a desire on the part of commentators, which I don't criticise, I just observe, to turn politics sometimes into a soap opera. Actually, the most important thing in politics are not the characters, but the policies. And what people will judge a Conservative or any other government on is the change that has been made in their lives for the better. And I think it's more important, but of course you can report whatever you like, that 1.8 million more children are in good or outstanding schools as a result of Conservative government, or that we've taken more action to improve our environment than our predecessors by meeting the call from Sky's Ocean Rescue Campaign to deal with plastics, or that by leaving the European Union we're providing new markets for our farmers and our fishermen. These are ultimately the big policy choices, the big changes, beneficial changes to the way our country is run, that people will remember long after any question of this or that cabinet minister having said this or that to the daily that or the weekly the other.
I love the fact that you're a poacher turned gamekeeper, because of course you were a journalist previously. I suppose some people might say that it's your fault that Boris is not the Prime Minister anyway, because if you hadn't stabbed him in the back, we wouldn't have seen Theresa May in charge at Number 10.
Well, Theresa's an outstanding Prime Minister, and the majority of Conservative MPs chose Theresa to lead the party. I think they made, we can all now recognise the right decision. Boris is an outstanding Foreign Secretary, and we're all part of a united team. But again, the dramas of the past will inevitably provide entertainment for politicians, for journalists actually, politicians perhaps as well. The dramas of the past will provide entertainment for journalists as they revisit them. But most people, I think, are more interested in how the policies announced this week will affect their daily lives than they are worried about who's up or who's down in whatever political ranking.
I think they're worried about who the Prime Minister of this country will be and who will be leading us into Brexit negotiations. And while it looks as though the Cabinet and the Kitchen Cabinet is squabbling, then it makes us less strong in negotiations as far as Europe and European leaders are concerned. concerned. With that in mind, do you regret undermining Boris ahead of the Prime Minister, our present Prime Minister, taking over?
That was quite a long question with many sub-clauses in it. The first part, I would say, is that you say people are worried or asking a question about who Prime Minister is. Theresa is a strong Prime Minister providing effective leadership, and there's universal support for her in the Cabinet and in the Parliamentary Party. The leadership election of over a year ago, well, people made their judgment at that point, and I think they made the right judgment in choosing Theresa. Boris and I, well, we are friends working together in order to secure the right Brexit outcome as part of Theresa's united team. Sometimes in politics, the dramas that people outside wish to invest these matters with isn't there. Sometimes, actually, politics is about the process of delivering a change to the common agricultural policy. I spend far more of my time worrying about how we can ensure that farmers can continue to get access to the markets, to the pesticides and to the labour they need than anything else. Boris spends the overwhelming majority of his time making sure that our diplomats abroad are selling a positive message of Britain, and the Prime Minister is concentrating on providing strong and effective leadership. And also during the course of this conference, we've had from David Gove an announcement about how we can improve universal credit. From Greg Clark, the outstanding business secretary. Well, this is news. Well, we've had a discussion, and on Sky News, I thought, as well as the commentary that you provided, I might also provide some news as well.
Yeah, well, we've been talking quite a lot about what's been happening in the United States today, as well as what's been happening in Manchester. A final thought from you on that.
Well, I think any of us contemplating what's happened in Las Vegas will just feel an enormous sense of sympathy with the families who've been affected. It's horrific. It's horrendous. Words can't really begin to describe or comprehend what happens when you have more than 50 people slaughtered in cold blood. And as the Prime Minister said earlier, our thoughts and prayers are with the victims of this horrific assault. And I think that all of us will, I think, hug our families a little bit closer this evening.
Absolutely. Seconded on that one. Mr. Gove, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us on Sky News this afternoon.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.